Welcome to everybody. My name is Zoe Hatch. I'm a Green Women's Declaration Director and I am the host this evening for this webinar. Whether you're a long-time supporter or someone that's curious about the work of Green Women's Declaration, or if you're joining us for the first time, we are delighted to have you here. So please know that you're all very welcome. I think it's worth saying that we believe in the power of open dialogue in Green Women's Declaration, and we embrace the philosophy of pluralism. So that really means that diverse perspectives and thoughtful discussion are not only welcomed, but they're actually something that we feel is essential to the work that we do. And of course, it's an integral part of our green values. Before we start, I just want to give you a few little updates. I know many of you will be signed up to our email list. Some of you will even be new member supporters for the Green Women's Declaration. 2 years ago, we started the Green Women's Declaration. We've now got 1,600 plus signatories of our declaration. And we've gone from strength to strength. Of course, it's in April of this year, we celebrated the Supreme Court's unanimous ruling clarifying that Sex and the Equality Act refers to biology, sex, and that was something that we in Green Women's Declaration were really relieved to hear, to be aware of, because it's something that really just underscored all of our values and everything that we've been campaigning about. So that was really wonderful news, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if Jude and Bev touch on that a little bit more as the evening progresses. Before we start, I do also want to acknowledge that the authoritarianism in the party has not abated, and I would say it's not an understatement to say that it has escalated. The latest in a long line of expulsions of Green Women's Declaration signatories, supporters, and this time our director, Pallavi, has been expelled from the party for no less than attending a Christmas social. What can I say except that, of course, we completely stand with Pallavi. It's an egregious sanction, and it's something that absolutely never should have happened, and we will do all we can to support her and other signatories that have been so unjustly sanctioned by the party, who really just feel like they're running amok increasingly. I think I'd just like to also let you know a little bit of some of the work around Green Women's Declaration that a lot of people don't know about. And that's some of the things that we do behind the scenes. We write a lot of letters lobbying the party, and we also are involved in various different cross-party conversations in order to try to make sure that our elected officials and members of the House of Lords are more aware of the issues. Not only why was the Supreme Court judgment a fantastic thing, but why it matters in practical application. So members of the Green Women's Declaration, on your behalf, the team have been working with other parties in order to just really ensure that that message continues to stay high on the agenda, to just really advocate for women's rights and for the rights of girls, for the rights of lesbians, and for all of the different demographics for which the Declaration really impacts. So I'm going to, without any further ado, I think, hand you over now to Jude. Now, Jude is another director of Green Women's Declaration, and she was expelled from the party last year. She used to be a Bristol councillor, and she was expelled for hosting a webinar not dissimilar to this, a conversation with esteemed barrister Sarah Phillimore, and that was a fantastic conversation. And if it resulted in her getting expelled, there's some who might say that that was somewhat of a badge of honour. I know that's certainly the way that I'm feeling about it at the moment, because it means somebody's standing up clearly and speaking up for material reality and truth and justice.
Thanks, Zoe. It's good to be back, isn't it? Well, we have had a busy year. I don't like to kind of go on and on, but Zoe's been working magnificently hard, and so have, under the radar, Lesbian Greens, a new group that you may have noticed popping up. We've been working in conjunction with them. And I'm really excited tonight to talk to Bev Jackson, who is, a lesbian shero. And one of the things we're going to talk about is the founding of the Lesbian, Gay and Bisexual Alliance. First of all, just to say a few words about Bev. Bev's an English literature teacher, or was for many years, I think at university level, and then was a translator because she speaks fluent Dutch and fluent English, and she's been translating away for the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which sounds quite interesting to me. I like a bit of language analysis myself, and now is a freelance academic translator. And many years ago, founded was one of the original founders of the UK Lesbian Gay Liberation Front. So she's also an author and wrote a book called A Month with Starfish, which is about her work with refugees. So a fantastic life history, a little snippet of it there, but also the main thing is Bev is at the moment very, very well known for founding the Lesbian LGB Alliance, an institution that's really, really needed at the moment. She co-founded it with Kate Harris, who's always been there at her side. And so just start off with saying, Bev, for those who don't quite understand, why did you feel the need to do that? And how long has the organisation been going?
Well, thank you very much for that lovely introduction, Jude, and I'm very happy to be here. And I'm very happy to see all you wonderful women fighting within the Green Party for a party for the environment, which is what the Green Party should be, and for fighting for freedom to exchange views in, as you say, in a civilized way, which all parties ought to provide space for, and just well done for doing that. So yes, so I was a founding member of the Gay Liberation Front way back in 1970. And then not long after that, actually, I mean, I was actually the spokesperson at our first march in November 1970, Highbury Fields. And yeah, I was just quoted as saying it's important to know that we're not ashamed to be homosexual. And for years I thought, what a timid thing to say. We're not ashamed to be homosexual. Actually, I really should have said something much more sensible. And I was only 19. I was in, a bit of a nitwit, actually. And I moved to the Netherlands not long after that. So I've lived most of my adult life in the Netherlands, all my adult life, really. And it wasn't really, and I thought everything was going fine, I mean, the Netherlands was the first country in the world to have gay marriage, and I didn't have any trouble bringing up children. People didn't think it was odd that there were lesbian parents. Oh, you're lesbian parents? Oh, yes. And just as if, if you had two vegetarian parents, oh, both vegetarians. But anyway, so just no problems. And it wasn't really until 2016 that I started noticing that something had gone wrong with the gay rights movement. And I saw Stella O'Malley's program on the TV, and I remember saying to some friends and family members that I was just musing. I was saying, these people who want to have body parts removed, their genitals removed. It's rather like those people who wanted a limb removed or something. I mean, isn't that terrible? And everybody fell over me like a ton of bricks, as if I'd said something that was absolutely appalling, and as if I'd become a racist or something. And I was very confused because I thought it was a very good comparison. And I thought, I don't know enough about this. So I went away and I started researching and researching and researching. And I discovered that not only adults, but boys were having, just minors, were having their bits cut off. And I found this really, really upsetting. I thought, what on earth is going on here? And then I remember the day I thought, God, I wonder if girls are doing it as well. And then I discovered that girls too were wanting to have their breasts cut off. And so then I got really upset. I got really upset because I thought, God, these are girls just like me. Because, I mean, I thought I was a boy when I was young. I mean, I think lots of lesbians do, or lots of so-called gender non-conforming. That's a silly phrase. You don't want to be like a girl. You're not a girly girl. You don't want pink dresses and all that stuff. You'd rather just muck around and play football. And so it seems more attractive to be a boy for all sorts of reasons, more independence and so on. And these are just girls like me, and they were wanting to be boys. They were thinking they had to be boys, and this was being cheered on as if this was a wonderful thing, as if this was something progressive. I just thought this was just really, really shocking, and it really upset me. And the more I studied it, the more upset I became that all the organizations which used to be for gay rights had sort of switched. It was as if gay marriage was the sign for, we've achieved that. There's nothing left. We better do something else. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? We've got all this stuff. We've got all this money. We've got all this goodwill. We better do something else. And of course, I mean, if you look at Stonewall, for instance, the choice could have been how about looking at all the countries in the world where homosexuality is still illegal? They could have turned their direction to that, but that wouldn't have brought in any money, and it would have been awfully difficult. So instead of doing that, they went the way that the Americans had gone and that many other countries had gone, and they decided to go for what I call gender identity. I don't call it trans rights because I think that, like many of the phrases that are used, is not a very good description of what happened. They go for gender identity. So instead of they changed the definition of homosexuality. And we all know that what homosexuality is. It's if you're sexually attracted to someone of the same sex. And they changed it to sexually attracted to someone of the same gender. Now, it was a sneaky trick because, of course, at the time, gender was often used as a synonym for sex. So nobody particularly noticed that it was a difference because gender means sex, doesn't it? No, they were using it in a new sense. And then gradually it became clear that they were detaching themselves from the material reality, from actual sex, and something really, really dark was going on, especially with children. I better stop there because otherwise.
Yes, well, I was going to say, so that's 2015, 2016, just around that time. So yes, I think Stonewall followed the money, didn't they? They started to follow the money, and then you decided that you wanted to start the LGB Alliance to be the, and it's still the only organisation in this country, isn't it, that just represents the LGB part of the kind of community, if we want to.
It's the only charity, yes. I mean, there are smaller LGB groups around the country and within political parties, and there are lesbian groups and gay groups as well. But we're the only charity, and we have to say exclusively. If I don't say exclusively, we got hauled over the coals by the advertising regulator for not saying exclusively.
Yes. Now, advertising is a funny thing, isn't it? We had a quick talk about that before, about the power of advertising and how in a way, the gender industry is just an arm of the advertising industry. We might come back to that later, but I wanted to move on to, we've just kind of touched on it a bit, the split then, the LGB and the TQ. What have you got to say to our audience about that? The kind of, the need for the LGB to talk about the fact that sex is real and that sexual orientation is real and sexual attraction is real, and the TQ section of the world, which is a different set of let's say, a different set of ideologies or things. Why is it so important for this division to be seen? And why is it important in say, for example, you know, in the wider world and pride? We touched on pride earlier and how there's been some problems in safeguarding. What about that area?
Well, let's just look at the LGBTQ plus IA plus so-called community. It doesn't exist, right? There's no such thing as the LGBTQIA plus community. And if we just look at it in the British terms, with the Equality Act, LGB is about relationships. It's about sex. It's about relationships that people have with each other. Lesbians to women, gay to men, and bi, you're attracted to both men and women. That's clear. It's about sexual orientation. That's the protected characteristic of sexual orientation. T is about people who have some issue with their gender identity. I don't know what a gender identity is. Nobody has ever explained it in any sensible way. It is not. It is a term that is used as if it is something, because people say my gender identity. Everybody has a gender identity. No, they don't. And don't let anybody tell you you've got a gender identity if you don't. I don't have a gender identity. I am a woman because I know that I'm a woman. It's clear. But I don't have a gender identity. In fact, I went online and discovered I was 100% masculine. So I don't think that a gender identity is a term that we need to use. So T is about that. The I is about people with medical disorders, differences of sexual development. It's got nothing to do with all this at all. And people who are asexual, don't know why they anyway. And Q has become just sort of a bag of all sorts of people, like straight people who want to think of themselves as a bit edgy. And then there's this awful plus at the end, and we all know about the plus. The plus is an open-ended plus, and we have no idea what sort of things belong in there. But I think we just found out with Stephen Ireland, who was just sentenced to 24 plus 6 years and that perhaps that was a bit of the plus there. I'm sorry, I'm jumping a bit ahead of myself. But
No,
anyway,
it's
it's forced teaming. LGB does not belong with all these other stuff. LGB is about sexual orientation and all these other things. Their interests are quite often sort of opposed to ours. For instance, if lesbians want to have a club or a dating site or something, and they want it only for lesbians in the way that we understand what lesbian means, then if men who call themselves or identify as or claim to be women also want to be admitted, there is obviously a clash of rights. And that in itself means that it's idiotic to talk about LGBT rights, because these rights are, I don't think they do have rights. We're talking about rights of LGBT people and the demands of people with gender identity, trans-identified people who want to infringe on their spaces. So there's the demands of the TQ plus groups are actually conflict with many of the rights of LGBT people, rights that we won and over decades and are now losing because people are very confused. So I would ask everybody never to say LGBTQ plus, but just to say LGB if that's what you mean, and TQ plus if you mean those other people.
I would agree with you there, definitely. And I think it's a big problem inside the Green Party, where we have very, very strong forced teaming and a very strong culture of suppressing free speech and of suppressing anybody who wants to talk about safeguarding. I think, looking down the list of people who are in this Zoom room, there's many who've put in complaints to the party, safeguarding complaints, and whistleblowers about safeguarding, including myself. That's one of the things I put in over 2 years ago, saying that we needed to be very careful and look very carefully at certain groups within the within the party. Of course, that's one of the risks, isn't it, about saying sex is not real and gender is something important. So the title of this is Sex is Real. Why do you think there's so much pushback to your organisation? I know you had a lot of pushback, legal battles, and there's certainly a lot of pushback inside the Green Party from anyone who dares to say, can we have a little investigate, little think about this? Can we look at safeguarding the young Greens, which of course in the Green Party is anybody under the age of 30. That whole group is put into the same section, and anybody any age can join the Green Party. There's no lower limit. So you can have 10-year-olds in the same group as a 25-year-old, which I think in any other organisation would be a little bit frowned on. What do you have to say about that kind of zone?
Well, wait a minute. You asked. I'm a bit lost because you asked something different at the beginning about why the pushback.
Yes, so really it's about why is there such a why is it so easy for people to push back against?
Well, what happened at the beginning was that we were so as I said, all the old gay rights organisations had all become gender identity organisations. They all called themselves LGBTQ plus whatever, two spirit, this and that. And when we came along, we were the first organisation in the world to say no, sorry, we don't do gender identity. We're just about sexual orientation. We're LGB. And until we arrived, it was anybody who said, hang on, this gender identity stuff was called homophobic. And so people didn't want to say that. So people, if they did think gender identity was a weird concept and they didn't really agree with it, they didn't dare, because they would be called homophobic. So here come these gays and lesbians, and we say no, we don't approve. It freed up a lot of people who wanted to say that they thought gender identity was a load of rubbish to say so. And that's why we were absolutely reviled from the very first day. We got thousands and thousands and thousands of messages of hate, but more messages of support and love and thanks. So it was just an extraordinary experience. That first week was like a year. It was just amazing. We had no idea that when we just had a little meeting at Conway Hall. We had 70 people. We spoke to each one on the phone, made sure that they were all sort of going to keep the secret. We had a secret meeting at Conway Hall on the 22nd of October 2019, and we just thought we would get going gradually. But Alison Bailey posted quite a forceful tweet, and we were suddenly news all around the world, and it was just astonishing, and it really didn't stop. It still hasn't stopped. The onslaught against us. It's now moved a bit more to the Americans now have picked up, and they've noticed it, and we're getting the same kind of pushback there that we've had since the beginning.
Mm.
And they want to insist on this amorphous this LGBTQ plus. If you separate it, it becomes clear that all the things that are causing trouble are actually in the TQ plus corner. And
Yes.
this breaking down of boundaries, which is what queer is all about. Get rid of boundaries, get rid of the boundary between male and female, get rid of the boundaries between adults and children, get rid of the boundaries between public and private. Let's just get rid of all boundaries. And that just leads to chaos.
Yes, it definitely does. Now, your organisation, of course, and your role in it has meant that you're a lot on the TV, and you were called on a great deal after the Supreme Court judgment. I've watched a few things earlier today where you spoke very eloquently about the judgment. For those who don't know, would you mind explaining a little bit more? Zoe touched on it, but it's very important for the sex is real part of our declaration in the Green Party. Could you just explain a little bit more about what happened in Britain and why you were asked to speak about it and the Supreme Court judgment?
Well, from when Ruth Hunt took over at the helm of Stonewall, she basically she immediately changed it from an LGB to an LGBT organisation, and she introduced this gender identity, which we were talking about, and also she very soon afterwards introduced what was called what Kate Harris has always called Stonewall law, which was basically it was basically self-ID. And she would persuade people. Stonewall persuaded people, and everybody loved Stonewall. Stonewall was wonderful, wasn't it? Stonewall was wonderful. It was a wonderful organisation which did so much for gay and lesbian rights for decades. And so people assumed when it became when Ruth Hunt took over, it was still the same organisation. But it wasn't. It changed completely. And it was still training people. It was giving courses and giving people points for doing what they asked them to do. And they were introducing essentially gender self-ID all around the country in public and private sector organisations, saying, yes, well, you can do whatever your gender says, even though that was not the law of the land. They taught people the wrong law. They taught people which was not the law. And everybody who tried to fight back would find themselves called transphobic and would have to go to court. And eventually, of course, with the Forstater ruling, the appeal ruling, Maya Forstater won a very, very important case in which gender critical views, which are just simply the views that we all have, that there are two sexes and that sex is often quite important, that were protected in the workplace. And this became an extraordinarily important view, but it was not being applied. It was not being applied, and it was particularly not being applied in Scotland. And for Women Scotland took a case which they fought at a lower court and then a higher court, and then eventually they took this case to the Supreme Court. They wanted the Supreme Court to rule on what woman means and what man means and what sex mean in the Equality Act, because lots of things depend on that, including sexual orientation. Sexual orientation is about sex. So it was extremely important. And the Supreme Court ruled unanimously on the 16th of April this year that the only coherent, this word crops up again and again in the ruling, the only coherent way to interpret the Equality Act is to say that sex means biological sex. And that has caused confusion among the people who have been taught the wrong law. I mean, it hasn't been caused confusion among most people because it's obvious. Of course, that's what it means. Of course, that was what it meant in 2010 when the Equality Act was adopted. But it's difficult for people who have been taught something completely different to accept, wait a minute, we were taught something. And the people who taught them are carrying on telling them that the ruling is wrong and that they're going to contest it at the European Court and all sorts of nonsense. They can't possibly. This is just nonsense. This is the law and they will not accept it.
Yes, I mean, I have to say, in the Green Women's Declaration, we've been doing a lot of research into why the Green Party particularly was so susceptible. We know that Stonewall Law was adopted inside the Green Party very early on, 2015, through Amy Challoner, which is another story we won't go into now, but if people want to look it up. And of course, we are battling now to this day the fact that Stonewall Law is so entrenched inside the Green Party that people think that even attending this webinar, being part of the Green Women's Declaration, saying sex is real, is somehow against the law. And our own MPs and our own leaders believe it. It's really, really worrying. There's been no statement from the Green Party on the Supreme Court judgment. And I think it's really, really depressing when a political party can't understand the law and follow the law. I mean, you were telling us about something that happened inside the Houses of Parliament recently, weren't you? Which is, of course, where we've got our 4 marvellous MPs now. But even the Houses of Parliament were struggling a bit, weren't they? What happened with your co-founder last week?
Well, I mean, the Houses of Parliament were not implementing the Supreme Court ruling, which is that if you have single-sex toilets, and certain premises are obliged to have single-sex services. Obviously, a tiny little cafe doesn't have to, but obviously a major institution like the Houses of Parliament must have single-sex toilets, and also other toilets and so on for other people. And it wasn't. And those have to be single sex. That is now clear from the rule. Single sex means single sex. And if one man, whether or not he considers himself a woman, goes to that space, it's no longer single sex. That is the law. And the Houses of Parliament were not implementing it. And anyway, so Kate Harris and Heather Binning of the Women's Rights Network were at a hearing of the Women and Equalities Committee, parliamentary committee, and they went to the loo afterwards. And as they went to the loo, they encountered the rather huge presence of Robin Moira-White. You may have seen Robin Moira-White. He's a very, very tall and very broad person. He's a barrister, and he's one of the people that continues to tell people the wrong law. And because he's a barrister, people think that what he says is true, and unfortunately it really isn't. But anyway, he had already said that he was not going to keep to the law. And so he headed into the women's toilets. And he's also very proud of saying, I've been using women's toilets for decades, and I've never been challenged. And I don't know what he meant by that. I've never been challenged. Did he really think that everybody thinks it's fine? Or did he not realize that because he's a very, very large person, that most women would not think it was very wise to challenge him? It certainly doesn't mean that they're perfectly fine with him being there. It simply means that that like most women, they're not going to take the risk that a very large man might get aggressive. But anyway, so he'd always said, I've never been challenged. So Kate Harris, who's not afraid of anybody, and Heather Binning, likewise, did challenge him, and they said, no, you don't belong here, and this is the women's toilet. And he made a great big fuss about this. Later, he called it an attack, and it did upset him because he hadn't experienced this before. But after that, Parliament was really called on to amend its rules, make it quite clear. And since then, they've got a sign up explaining that the toilets, that single-sex toilets, are you either use the toilets of your own sex or the gender-neutral toilets, which are also there. So I'm proud of Kate Harris and Heather Binning for getting that change that the House of Parliament. If there's one place that really ought to be setting the tone and helping other institutions get in line, it's the House of Parliament. So I'm very glad they did that.
Yes, and of course that's exactly the point, isn't it? We're in a political party, or we're members of a political party. We're talking about the Houses of Parliament where the laws are made and where culture is kind of defined, and brings us full circle, really. I think back to the fact that this is the first one of our new series of webinars. So this is the first part of the Women's Declaration is sex is real. Sex matters in law, in life, and in policy. That's the fundamental thing that we're trying to say in this webinar and to the Green Party. I think we've come to the end of our half-hour chat, and I think it's Zoe. It's got some questions from our audience. I've got one to start off with while Zoe gets herself ready, I think, because this came in from somebody through our email channel, and it says, considering that society has always known who were male and female for reproductive, social, and punitive legal reasons, can you suggest why it's been so easy for this basic biological truth to be overthrown so quickly in almost every imaginable context? So, you know, education, the law. Why do you think it was able to take hold so quickly, Bev?
Well, it's been a very clever movement, I have to say, and they have exploited the kindness of women. Be kind, you know, this wonderful phrase which is meant to shut women up, and they've exploited the gains made by the gay rights movement. After all, if you assume that life is all about reproduction, then it takes a further step to understand that, oh, some people are same-sex attracted. And well, then maybe it's just they presented these trans people who supposedly were trapped in the wrong body, as this incredibly sad, tiny little minority who really have got such a hard life that that you really have to be very kind to them. And a lot of people felt guilty that they hadn't been kind enough to the gays. And so they were very quick to show that they're going to be very, very kind to these trans people that they didn't understand at all, but they understood that that must be right because their children say it's right, and they don't want to be called names. It was very clear soon that if you didn't go along with this, you were going to be called horrible names, and nobody wants to be called horrible names. I think that most people don't know everything about most people only know a few things quite well. So the easy thing to do is to plug yourself into a newspaper. For instance, it used to be like 20 years ago, if you asked me, what are your politics? I would say, well, I'm a Guardian reader. So in other words, I would go to the Guardian, and if I knew about a subject, then I'd, you know, find that would be interesting. And if I didn't know about a subject, I'd assume that in the Guardian I was going to read good stuff, which was going to help me. You know, I wasn't really a critical reader. I don't think many people are. It didn't occur to me that I might be reading complete rubbish in the Guardian, because I knew the Telegraph was rubbish. The Guardian is good, the Telegraph is bad. And I think an awful lot of people, in order to simplify the world, do that. You plug yourself into the Guardian, you think, and then you suddenly discover, wait a minute, the Guardian has got this thing completely wrong. And that's very confusing, actually. And oh my God, I found some very sensible article in the Daily Mail. How's that possible? I always thought the Daily Mail was rubbish, the Telegraph was horrible, and the Guardian was good. And then you start realizing that you have been tribal all this time. So I think the answer to the question, how was it so easy, is it was presented as the new progressive thing, that it was the latest civil rights movement. And that's very much how it's been presented in the United States. And as you know, anything that's presented in the United States tends to drift over. It's the latest civil rights battle, and these are the people, it's the last bastion. You know, everybody else has got their rights, but the poor trans people haven't yet. And it was just not questioned. It was not questioned, because if you questioned it, you were called horrible names.
Yes, I think that was one thing, wasn't it? And I would just add that I think that people underestimate the power of advertising and the power of the modern industrial medical complex to sell whatever it wants to whoever it likes. So, you know, we don't really go in depth enough, do we? Zoe.
Yeah, I should. Sorry, huge amounts of money. I mean,
Yes.
huge amounts of money have been poured into propagating this industry, which is, as you say, this is the transition industry is a it's a $1 billion
marketing,
industry.
yes,
Yeah.
it's an industry of cosmetic surgery, drugs.
Yeah.
You're a medical for life, you know, it's hugely lucrative. I think we've also got this idea when we were younger that, you know, doctors are all marvelous, altruistic, fantastic people. And I know a lot of them are, but there's also people who work in every industry who aren't and who will just make money, isn't it? So I think we
Well,
don't talk
now
about.
we talk about the lobotomy scandal. You know, the
Yeah,
doctor who discovered lobotomy was given a Nobel Prize, and that was, and also so a lot of really major socialists who very much admired in the 1920s supported eugenics. I mean, there have been some really very bad. That was a social movement. Lobotomy was a medical movement, and what we've got now is a combination of the two, and that is
yes.
why it is so dangerous.
And a huge medical scandal. I think,
Great
Zoe, you've got
question.
some questions.
I have, yes, thank you. It's been suggested that puberty blockers give confused or dysphoric teens time to explore what is causing their distress. Why are other people so against them? I think
Well,
this.
all right. So this is one of the myths that is, there's a few myths that unfortunately have been sold. One is that puberty blockers gives you time to think. And I would advise everybody, if you haven't read Hannah Barnes's book, Time to Think, which explains exactly why that really isn't true. We know that almost every child who takes puberty blockers goes on to cross-sex hormones. So, and some people say, yes, well, that's because it's so well diagnosed. No, that doesn't make any sense because doctors have no way of knowing, which child will persist and which will not. And no doctor will pretend that they can. It isn't possible. So what it does is the puberty blockers set a child on the path to cross-sex hormones and possibly to surgery, certainly in the case of girls in particular, are likely to want to have their breasts removed and so on. So the whole idea that puberty blockers gives time to think is wrong. What it does is it blocks the most essential, one of the most essential parts of life, which is the period, which is traumatic for so many people, puberty, the part of life through which a child has to pass in order to become an adult. To block that is criminal. It is an absolute medical scandal that it has been sold as care. It is not care, it is abuse.
Thank you, Bev. I think it's so important for us to be clear on that. And I'm seeing lots of reactions in the chat there as well. Jude, I'm just sending one over for you to ask. But before you do that, we've had another question come in, which is about Carla. Carla is a current leader of the party, Carla Denyer. She's also an MP, and I know, it's been very upsetting for many members of the party, particularly lesbians in the party, because LGB Alliance has been labelled by her as a hate group. I wondered if you wanted to have an opportunity to respond to that, or just the general detraction that happens to you, Bev, from other members of
Well,
the party.
as you know from the beginning, we have been labelled all sorts of names, just as individuals are labelled, given all sorts of hateful names. This is just a way to shut people up. If you call somebody names, then it encourages other people to think, oh, I better keep away from that, better not listen to them. It's just a way to stop people listening to you. If you hear, yeah, I mean, you imagine in a street, if people keep saying, oh, that person at number 68, oh, he's an absolute bigot, then people will think, okay, well, I better keep away from him then. And that is just, it's gossip, it's malicious gossip, and it is based on absolutely nothing. I mean, we are the least hateful people in the world, you know, and I'm always very happy to talk to trans-identifying people who are very much on our side and supportive. They tend not to talk much in public because they get unbelievable. They get much worse abuse even than we do because they get called traitors and God knows what. But there are plenty of trans-identifying people who go about their business. It was very funny, actually. You occasionally see trans-identifying men saying that they couldn't possibly go to men's toilets because they would they would be attacked. And then you get a couple of trans-identifying men who always wear nice dresses and always go to men's facilities, and they say, no, actually, it's perfectly fine, never had any trouble. Calling people names, whether it's a bigot or hateful or Nazi or whatever it is, it's a way to stop people listening to you, and people do it because they don't have any arguments. There's no reason to call people names if you can say, well, no, I don't agree with you because of this and this and this. But if you have no arguments, the best way to shut someone up is to just call them names, and they hope that people will that mud will stick. And some of the mud does stick, of course. People do sometimes think, okay, well, I mean, if that person says this, it must be true. And then they meet us, and you sort of see them, oh, actually, they seem to be quite nice people. I must have got that wrong.
Absolutely, and I think what you're saying there completely echoes the experience that we have in the Green Party of this bullying culture, which has become increasingly pervasive, and again goes absolutely against green values of the green values of pluralism we were talking about earlier, and really just the need for us, if we're going to find some of the solutions that we're facing as a society, as different communities, we have to be able to listen to each other, and bullying and silencing is just not going to help us progress in that. Jude, a question from you. Back to you,
yes, just like to say thank you to whoever put in the puberty blocker question, because I'd just like to put a shout out really for one of our directors who was mentioned at the beginning, Dr. Pallavi, who many of you will know, who is, of course, a real doctor in the real world. And let's be clear that one of the reasons why she's been expelled is not because she went to a Christmas party, it's because she dared to talk about exactly what you've talked about, Bev, the dangers of suppressing the puberty and the transition to adulthood and the dangers of bad medicine. So let's just be really clear that that's what she did.
And can I just say,
it.
before puberty blockers, of course, what comes before that is this terrible lie, this terrible, terrible lie which has been told to children that you might be the opposite sex, that it's possible to change sex. You might have been born in the wrong body. And in America, born in the wrong body is still very commonly said. In the UK, much less so. But this is just such a terrible, terrible thing to teach children. You don't teach children that you might be able to fly because they might actually jump out the window and discover they can't. You don't teach children lies. It's an absolute horror. And also to teach children that if a girl says that she's a boy, that you have to call her he, is also, you're teaching children to lie. Yes, but you have to be kind. This is not kind. We come back to this, be kind. Lying is not kind. And I think we go back to Magdalene Burns there, who knew very well that there was nothing kind about lying to people. We have to be stronger. And when people tell us to be kind, you can go two ways. You can either say it isn't kind to lie to people, or you can say I just don't care. I don't care. It's whether you tell me I have to be kind or not. There's a big argument going on about pronouns and pronouns. Look, people, it is not kind to anybody, and it is particularly damaging to society to spread lies among children. And I read this horrible, horrible case in which a woman had had a child and she decided to take her testosterone and call herself man. And she would not tell, so she called herself the child's daddy. And the child said, but where's my mummy? And this woman wouldn't say that she was actually the child's mum. I thought this was so disgusting. I mean, the kinds of lies that people are telling to children are just beyond belief.
It is, and it's very upsetting inside the Green Party, particularly when if you try to tell the truth, you are expelled. And if you lie through your teeth, even in a part of senior leadership, you're allowed to carry on. I'll just leave that one there. You've just answered one of the questions on my list, actually. They're about how do you think people are harmed, young people are harmed. So I'll miss that one out. I'll go to the one at the top, which is, it's about Pride, actually. It's Pride Month, for those of you who don't know. I have to say, I went to an all-lesbian thing the other night. Really shocking, because there was only lesbians in the room. And it was Claire Summerskill, I don't know if you know her, Bev, called Why Did God Make Lesbians? And the answer is to have fun.
That's a great answer.
The question is about whether Pride has changed this year. Are there less Pride progress flags? And the kind of related, do you think that the kickback against all this stuff means that support for lesbian and gay and bisexual people will reduce? I mean, I know you don't live all the time in the UK.
It's certainly a danger, I think. I mean, the fact is that Pride is it's become a disgusting display. On the one hand, disgusting because of the commercialisation. I mean, that's something I think that even the woke crowd agree about. But also the just displays of fetishes and so on, and open displays to children. And there was one particular, this Pride in Surrey case, which
Oh,
has
yes.
achieved a lot of. I hope that people have read these horrible details today. There's a photo of this Stephen Island with a so-called pup on a lead. And this pup with a dog mask turned out to be a 17-year-old girl.
Mm.
And I mean, the lack of safeguarding, the complete absence of safeguarding. As soon as you say LGBTQ, it's like a magic thing. Oh, you don't have to worry about safeguarding because it's LGBTQ. What? What do you mean? Excuse. And I think one of you said before we started about a sacred caste, that you're not allowed to question, you're not allowed to investigate. It's just not done. You as soon as you say trans or you say LGBT, you're not allowed to look anymore. And the complete failure of anyone who was told back in 2021 about the lack of safeguarding in Surrey, Pride in Surrey, is just a disgrace, and I really hope that they get to the bottom of it and find out who knew and who failed to take action when several really brave people stepped up and tried to get them to listen and take action.
Yes, well, let's hope inside the Green Party as well that the new CEO, Harriet Lamb, is able to look at some of the safeguarding complaints and alerts that have been put in by many, many members of this group. I've got a question here about whether you think that there might be a silver lining to this current situation in that some of the discussions we're having, in fact, things like the Green Women's Declaration actually existing inside the party and the Supreme Court judgment. Do you think there might be a revival in feminism, proper feminism, on the back of this?
I think there definitely is. I mean, I think a lot of women are starting to realise that what they had thought was progressive isn't progressive at all. I mean, people who think that gender identity is progressive really haven't given it much thought, to be quite honest. I mean, as soon as you really go into it and you understand what people are requiring you to say and do and believe, then you realise this is not progressive. It's actually quite a belligerent or almost a dictatorial regime being imposed by a section of society. And so I do think, obviously, we've achieved a lot in the UK, and we should not forget that. And we nearly had self-ID in England and Wales. We stopped it. We certainly nearly had it in Scotland, and we stopped it. Now, when I say we, I don't mean just LGB Alliance, obviously. I mean LGB Alliance and all the women's groups and other groups that have fought so hard against these the incursions of gender identity into our culture. And
Yes.
we got the Tavistock Jude's closed down. We got puberty blockers banned. We're sort of getting cross-sex hormones banned, which is even more important because cross-sex hormones, testosterone for girls is really dangerous. You can look at the list of things that it causes. It's really shockingly dangerous drug. And the list goes on and on, of course, ending with the Supreme Court judgment, which is a fantastic achievement. Yes, of course, it's not a silver lining. It's a definite advance. We're definitely moving forward. But the people, the opposition is very, very fierce, and so I'm afraid it's going to take a very long time for us to get back to a state in which women and LGBT people have the rights that we know that we deserve.
Yes, I think you're right. I think there is a bit of. I feel personally that there is a slight shift in the pride thing. There's more stuff for lesbians this year in Bristol, where I live, than I think there has been before, and I feel a slight change in the waters. And I hope feminism is going to be empowered by this. I'm going to go back to Zoe now because Zoe's got some other questions that have come in the chat.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for sending in your questions. I have this one, Bev, which is beautifully phrased. It's asking, can you talk about the wider ways in which denying the clear existence of two sexes prevents girls in particular from being able to name and confront the ways in which they are oppressed or disadvantaged as girls? That speaks to me as a mother, and also from memory as a young woman experiencing everyday sexism and just needing really to be able to speak up for what was happening to me. So yeah, over to you.
Well, really, the question almost answers itself, doesn't it? If you can't name something, then you can't discuss it. And if you don't look, if you're not aware of the biological basis of the oppression of women, then you can't fight back against it, and you can't even develop an awareness of it. And it's just so obvious that I think it was Andrea Nobri made a list of all the ways in which the women's biology is responsible for so many different kinds of oppression, from femicide to forced marriages at incredibly young ages, to menstrual taboos. I mean, it's obviously, it's very obvious. And at the UN, the only person who insists on standing up for this, Reem Al Salem, is our valiant person at the UN Special Rapporteur on violence against women and girls. And she consistently emphasizes this, the biological basis for oppression of women and girls. And she is slammed. There was a horrible, horrible statement made against her the other day by other people, either in or adjacent to the UN. I can't remember exactly. But I mean, she's under attack all the time, as if this is something, anything, as soon as you start talking about the biological basis for women's oppression, you get called transphobic. It's just a name. It's another name. It's to stop you thinking, to stop you talking, to shut you up. Transphobic, I once called the dragon in the road. You get there and you can't go further because you've been called transphobic, and therefore you're not allowed to think, you're not allowed to talk. So of course, if you do not understand that there are two sexes, and one of those sexes is women, and they are born as girls, and they are therefore from the beginning in a certain position in society, that they belong to a certain sex class, and that it doesn't limit you in what you do. At least in our society it does. Of course, there's many countries, the worst perhaps being Afghanistan, where being a girl is just an absolutely appalling prison. But even in our own countries, there are ways in which you ought to be able to identify, oh yes, it's because I'm a girl. And if you haven't understood that what a girl is, that's a sex class, and that if you haven't understood what the patriarchy is and how it works, then it's very, very difficult to understand why, to process your experiences and put them in context.
Yeah, thank you, Bev. And a shout out to Green Party Women there, the special interest group within the Green Party. I know they've done a lot to champion the appalling treatment of women in Afghanistan and continue to do that. So if people do want to check out the Green Party Women website, I highly recommend that. And there's some quite challenging, harrowing webinar testimonies that women have heard in that group. I want to just address a question that might even be better put to Jude as well, but please do also jump in, Bev. It's around, and we've had somebody actually from the Scottish Green Party contact us, and the way that they've been treated up there is particularly appalling. But there's just questions about, can the Green Party be saved? Can it find its way out of this mess that it's found itself in?
It has to. You've got to have a party that fights for the environment. So there is no choice, and you are all doing it. So yeah, sorry, over to you, Jude.
Can it be saved? Well, that was a bit in from the interesting, isn't it? It just mixes in with a question I've got here from somebody as well about, I don't know. Let me just get my thoughts straight. Can it be saved? It's interesting, isn't it? Is it the Green Party anymore, or has it turned into something else completely different? Has the dragon in the road actually kind of, burned it to a crisp and something's going to be reborn? There's a question here for you actually, Bev, about, are gay men becoming more aware of these issues? And, have you noticing it in the Lesbian Gay Alliance? I'm just going to put in to the room that I was having a conversation with someone inside the party a few weeks ago who talked about the gay male mafia at the top of the Green Party. The fact that Chris Williams, the now deputy CEO, is a white gay man. The fact that Joe Hudson Small is a white gay man. The fact that Zach Polanski is a gay man of Jewish heritage. And that we still seem to have these, so we've got these three very, very powerful men at the top of the party who don't seem to understand anything about this.
I don't know why you mentioned he was of Jewish heritage, but
because he goes on about it. No, well, no, it's irrelevant to this particular discussion, apart from actually he uses that part of his identity to very much push a particular brand of politics. So he uses his identity very strongly inside the party. And I just think that while we've got people like that in charge, actually, or if Zach wins and it will be very hard to reclaim the party. I'm just going to say those words out loud. I think, unless there's a change at the top, it's going to be hard. And it's interesting to compare that to friends of mine who talk about the Labour Party, where we see a definite shift, in the mindset. And we've got people like Wes Streeting, of course, who is a gay man, who did change his tune and said very strongly, I was wrong on this. He was one of the ones who wasn't awake and didn't realise it. And he said, and is now very strongly saying, I was wrong and we need to make some changes. So that's why we see such strong changes at the top and in Parliament. So can it be saved? Well, if the Green Women's Declaration carries on and does some good political work and litigates against them, which I very much hope we will do in the next year, I think there is some hope that we can turn it round. If Harriet is a strong leader, maybe we can turn it round. We'll have to see, won't we? We've got, like I say, I agree with you, Bev. We have to try, because we do need a party based in ecological materialism that understands the reality of the world to be doing something. And if it's not the Green Party, something else will emerge, won't it? There will be a new party that will speak into this place of democracy and reality and whatever. That's what happens in politics. Things change. Anyway.
Yeah, I just want to come back to this thing about the gay male mafia. Well, I think one thing that I think a lot of us have noticed about the last few years is that we're living through a period of profound misogyny. It's the most misogynistic period I've ever been through. It's perfectly just okay to hate women, but the misogyny. And I want to make it very clear, we work with gay men and lesbians and bisexuals in LGB Alliance, and the gay men are absolutely wonderful. But there is misogyny among gay men, and the misogyny among straight men is kind of mixed, because straight men are dependent on women, and there's a kind of love-hate kind of peculiar kind of misogyny among straight men, whereas the misogyny of gay men is kind of pure. There is a really quite terrible misogyny among some gay men, and I hate having to say this, I represent LGB Alliance, but there are some profoundly misogynistic gay men who wield quite a lot of power at the top of government and the civil service and in the NHS. And are some of provide some of the biggest barriers to us moving forward. And yeah, I don't know what to say. You also celebrities and so on, some very, very well-known gay male celebrities who think it's very amusing to pour scorn on Joe Rowling and on us and all of us. They can make cheap jokes about it, and they don't care about us at all. They don't care about lesbians at all, or women.
Yes, and this is also part of the confusion, isn't it? And it makes it very difficult inside parties and places where identity politics has become such an important part of the way that you can progress up a career ladder or whatever. So in terms of I sounded a bit vitriolic there against Joe, Chris and Zach. I have nothing against them being gay men. It's about the use of power that they I think they abuse their power in this situation. And of course, with Zach, it's added in, I think, that he has a Jewish heritage, which he's very proud of. I'm married to a Jewish woman who's from a very Orthodox background. It's about the fact that using that particular part of your identity to further yourself politically or make a particular argument inside the party is very easy to do. And it seems a particularly unpleasant part of Green politics, actually, which should be, I actually spoke to an old school Green the other day who said the Green Party should be about all humans and all people and all living beings. The identity part of where we are should be very backgrounded. I think that's something that I really wish we could get back to inside.
Well, it depends what you mean by identity. I mean, what I think is really, really damaging is this whole culture of labels. And we were talking before, I think, about
Yes.
my sort of view that people find life too chaotic, that suddenly, you know, with their online world, they can communicate with people on the other side of the world. It's extremely chaotic, and in order to make it in order to make it a bit more manageable, they need to have labels. They need to say, I'm a this and a this and a this. I belong in this box and this box and this box, and therefore I can. It just is a way of making life appear more manageable. And it's deeply troubling because it creates walls between people which don't need to be there. And it
Yes.
makes it much more difficult for people to actually communicate. And another, of course, really big. This is partly due to the internet, and another big consequence of the internet is that I think a lot of young people who spend too much time playing video games and sort of having alternate personas on the internet are disconnected from their bodies, and so sex isn't real for them because they engage with other people online in perhaps more than they do in real life, and so the whole reality of their body has sort of faded away from them. I remember talking to a psychiatrist who said that her patients in the ages between 15 and 25 often had profound, were far too embarrassed to ever refer to their genitals, and they thought that it was something you shouldn't do because it was a bit rude, because it shouldn't matter what genitals you have because that's just a superficial thing, and what really matters is, you know, these are various different influences, I think, that come from living mostly online.
I think that's a really important thing that, again, we don't possibly talk about enough in our own party, about the fact that all our meetings have moved to online. Zoom's a marvelous thing. The fact that you're able to be with us today, and we've got, you know, over 70 people in this Zoom is brilliant, isn't it? But the disembodied part of it is really shocking. I think you've just answered a question that I've got in my list here, where somebody's asked about cultural.
Can I build on that, Jude?
You
Because it's
can.
something we've talked about before as well, and you know, we're talking about identity kind of being comforting, but I wonder if you feel that there's a shift towards wanting those kind of simple answers or clear boxes because of the reality that somehow our young people unconsciously know that we're facing. You know, we are facing a climate catastrophe. There are going to be severe consequences for our young people further down the line, and I wonder if you think that is part of what kind of fuels the unconscious psyche without wanting to get too airy fairy. It's just kind of there in
Well,
the
I do think that quite a lot of young people who are very either sensibly conscious of the climate change, or perhaps really extremely anxious about climate change. For that reason, they and I'm sure there was some research on, but I can't quote it exactly, that they are less likely to want to have children, and that therefore the whole fertility, the whole body aspect of, you know, how the fact that the human race is actually based, you know, that it has to reproduce and so on, that aspect has sort of flown out of the window for them, and that they don't connect with it. And that it is just another factor, I think, that enables them to sort of disconnect from their bodies. But I can't prove that. I haven't researched it properly.
well, no, but we are here. I'm very interested to hear your views.
And what I would like to encourage people to speak out. We have reached, I think, as Jude was saying, we have reached a point of change. Do speak out if you can, and encourage those around you to speak out. Strike up conversations with people around you so that we gradually spread, make it easier. For the more people speak out, the easier it becomes. And it's so important. I remember speaking to a man in the Labour Party a few years ago, who just got so miserable about the fact that his party, the Labour Party, had no proper structures within which to discuss really important matters like this, really difficult issues. And this is obviously true of the Green Party, and it's obviously true of the Liberal Democrat Party, and it's, you know, it's probably true of the Conservative Party. It's just political parties need to create space within which to discuss really difficult issues. And I hope you manage to do that within the Green Party, and I wish you all very much success in doing so.
Thank you so much, Bev. And can I just say that, of course, as well as talking, listening is a skill that feels like it's something that we're losing, but it's been brilliant to have everybody coming along this evening and listening so wonderfully and asking all the questions that they have done. Just want to give another little plug to say that Green Women's Declaration is a voluntary organisation. You can join our membership supporter scheme if you want to, and of course we also very welcome to take donations if anybody wants to just pop a little bit of something in the hat if you've had a great experience this evening. Any help or support that you can give is very generously received, particularly, as Jude said, because we are exploring looking at how to hold the party to account. And one of the routes that we're exploring is via a legal recourse, shall we say. So it's been wonderful. I am just going to say thank you, Jude, for a brilliant evening. Thank you, Bev, so much. Jude, do you want to have the final word, my friend? And then we'll say...
Well, I just want to say thank you to Bev, actually. It's been really nice to meet you. I'm not sure I've met you before. I know your work, watched your work from afar. I'll be coming to the conference in April. I know you've moved the LGB Alliance conference to April, which I think is a very sensible thing.
Yeah, well, it's like October is conference season, isn't it? So it's just a bit mad, yeah.
We have our October conference. Can I encourage, in fact, anyone who's still in the Green Party who's watching to go to conference, to have the opportunity then to do exactly what Bev said. That's what it's supposed to be for, talking about things, discussing policies, discussing difficult things like what is the future of the Green Party. So anyone who is a member, encourage you to sign up to that. And I just want to say thank you to the organising team. This says Green Women's Declaration on the tin, but behind the scenes, there were some special lesbians in the lesbian Greens, and they know who they are. And I just want to say so much heartfelt thanks to you for all the work you do behind the scenes, and sometimes very behind the scenes, because it's so tough to be a lesbian inside the Green Party these days. So just, thank you very, very much.
Well, and thank you, Zoe. Thank you, Zoe, and Jude and everyone else in the organisation who helped make this possible. I've really enjoyed talking to you, and good luck, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon. Take care.